The night felt quiet when Sandra Bullock walked into the studio. She came for a simple interview, but her steps were slower than usual, and her eyes held a softness that felt heavy. The lights were bright but not harsh, and the room carried a calm silence that made every sound feel louder. She kept her hands together as if she wanted to hide something from the world. The moment she sat down, she took a slow breath as if preparing herself for a memory she had tried not to touch for a long time. The host smiled and began with gentle questions, trying not to break the mood of the room. Sandra answered with her usual calm voice, but even her calmness felt fragile. Viewers could sense that something deeper lived behind her answers. She laughed lightly at a few moments, but the laughter did not reach her eyes. They looked as if they were searching for a place to rest. Only 5 minutes passed before the host paused and looked at her with curiosity. Then he said something that changed the air in the room. He said a name. He said it softly. He said it with respect. He said the name that always carried a quiet power around Sandra. He said Keanu Reeves. The moment that name left his mouth, Sandra froze for a breath. It was not fear, it was not shock, it was something deeper. Her eyes softened even more and her fingers tightened gently. She looked down for a second as if that name opened a door in her heart she was not ready to open yet. The host noticed her change but stayed silent. The cameras caught everything. The viewers could feel the shift. It felt like someone had touched a memory that still carried warmth and weight. Sandra smiled, but it was a slow, fragile smile, the kind that comes from old emotions that never fully fade. She lifted her head and said in a quiet voice that Keanu had always been someone she respected more than she could explain. Her voice carried honesty and something close to longing. She said he had a way of making moments feel safe. She said he was the kind of person who left a mark on your life without ever trying to. The host leaned in and asked her what memory came first when she heard his name. She closed her eyes for a moment, and the audience could see she was choosing her words carefully. Finally, she said there was one moment she never forgot, one moment she always carried, one moment she never spoke about before. The room fell silent as if everyone was waiting to hear something sacred. She began slowly. She said that years ago during a quiet evening on set she had been tired and confused about something in her personal life. She did not tell anyone. She kept it hidden behind her smile, but Keanu saw it. He looked at her with those calm eyes of his and somehow knew she was not all right. He did not ask questions. He did not push her to talk. He simply walked to her and sat beside her in silence. She remembered him placing a gentle hand near hers without touching it and telling her that she did not always have to be strong for everyone. Those words stayed with her for years. She said she was not ready for that moment back then. She was not ready to hear something so soft and so true, but she carried it with her. She said that moment helped her during some of the hardest days of her life, but she never told him that. The host listened closely and then asked her if she ever wished she had told Keanu how much that moment meant to her. Her eyes softened again. She looked away from the camera as if the memory was close enough to touch. She whispered yes. She whispered that sometimes the most important things are the ones we never find the courage to say. The viewers felt her voice shake a little. She quickly looked up again, trying to hold herself together, but her silence said more than her words. The host gently asked her if she ever had the chance to speak with Keanu about that night. Sandra took a deeper breath and shook her head. She said life moved fast and she never found the right time. She said she thought she would have the chance later, but time kept moving and days turned into years. Her voice broke slightly when she said she always wondered if he remembered that night the same way she did. The host then asked her another question that created a sudden suspense. He asked if she would want to see him now and tell him everything she never said. She did not answer immediately. She looked down at her hands again and took another long breath. Then she gave a small emotional smile and said she did not know if she was ready. The studio lights felt warmer at that moment. Her eyes glowed with emotion and the viewers could feel her heart opening slowly. She whispered that some memories are beautiful but also heavy. Some memories return with a strength you cannot control, and Keanu was one of those memories for her. The host leaned back and asked gently if she would still speak to him if she got the chance. Sandra looked up again with a soft, steady expression. She said she hoped she would. She said she wished for one moment where they could sit again like they used to. She said she wanted to tell him something she never said before. Just when she finished speaking, something unexpected happened. One of the studio staff quietly approached the host and whispered something into his ear. His eyes widened with surprise. He looked back at Sandra with a look that held both excitement and confusion. The audience leaned in. Even Sandra noticed the sudden change. The host smiled slowly and said the words that made Sandra's heart stop for a second. He told her that someone had just arrived at the studio. Someone she did not expect. Someone who heard about this interview only an hour ago and came quietly without saying anything. He told her that Keanu was here. The moment felt unreal. Sandra's breath caught in her chest. She did not move. The room grew silent again. The viewers could feel the tension and emotion rising like a wave. Sandra slowly placed a hand near her heart as if trying to steady herself. She whispered the same words the audience felt. She whispered that she was not ready. But the door behind them slowly opened, and Keanu Reeves stepped into the room. The door opened slowly, and Keanu walked in with his calm, steady steps. The studio lights touched his face gently, and for a moment the entire room felt still. He did not speak. He simply looked at Sandra with the same warm eyes she remembered from years ago. It was as if time folded quietly between them, bringing all the old feelings to the surface. Sandra stared at him in silence. Her breath felt tight and her heart was beating faster than she expected. She did not stand. She did not move. She only whispered his name without meaning to. It came out soft, almost broken, as if her voice carried years of emotions that had been waiting too long. Keanu gave a small, gentle smile and nodded at her, a gesture so calm and familiar that it almost made her eyes fill with tears. The host slowly stood up, giving them space. The cameras kept rolling, but no one in the room dared to make a sound. Even the viewers could feel the tension building, a mix of fear, joy, confusion, and something unspoken between two people who had shared more quiet moments than the world ever knew. Keanu walked closer and stopped a few steps away from her. Sandra finally stood up, though her legs felt weak. She smiled, but her smile trembled slightly. She expected Keanu to speak first, but he simply waited, giving her the time she needed. He always did that. He always gave room instead of pressure. Finally, she whispered, asking when he came and why he was here. Her voice was soft but filled with honest confusion. Keanu looked down for a moment, then looked into her eyes again. He said that he heard she was doing an interview and something told him he needed to be here. He said he did not want her to speak about old memories alone. He said memories are lighter to carry when someone shares them. His words made her chest tighten. She held her hands together because they were shaking slightly. She said she never expected him to come. Keanu nodded again and said he knew. He said she never expected him to hear the things she had kept inside, and that was exactly why he came. The host asked them to sit, but even after they sat down, the energy in the room did not settle. Sandra kept looking at her hands, trying to compose herself. Keanu stayed beside her with quiet patience. He did not push her to talk. He simply sat close enough to let her feel safe, just like all those years ago. The host cleared his throat and asked a question with careful respect. He asked Keanu if he remembered the moment Sandra spoke about earlier, the moment when she was tired and struggling and he sat with her in silence. Keanu turned his head slightly, looking at Sandra before answering. His eyes softened. He said yes. He said he remembered that night clearly. He said he noticed she was hurting even though she tried to hide it with her usual bright smile. The host asked him why he chose silence instead of questions. Keanu did not hesitate. He said some people do not need words. They need presence. They need someone to sit beside them without pushing them to open their pain. He said the quiet moments often heal more than big speeches. Sandra felt her throat tighten at his words. She blinked slowly, trying not to show how deeply they affected her. She said she never told him how much that moment meant. Keanu looked at her with a gentle expression and said he knew. He said he could feel it even if she never said it out loud. The host leaned in again and asked something that changed everything. He asked if there was something unspoken between them that both wished they had said earlier in their lives. The question made Sandra look away, and Keanu's face grew thoughtful. The tension rose again, soft but sharp. The viewers leaned in closer, sensing something important hiding beneath their silence. Sandra finally spoke. She said she had always felt comfort around Keanu. She said he made her feel understood without needing explanations. She said she did not realize how rare that feeling was until later in life. Her voice grew lower when she said she always wondered why she never shared more with him when she had the chance. Keanu listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took a slow breath and said he felt something similar. He said he always admired her strength, her kindness, and the way she always cared about everyone else before herself. He said he noticed every time she struggled, even when she tried to hide it. He said he wished he had told her that more often back then. The studio crew felt the emotion in the air. Even the host stayed quiet for a moment. Then he asked a question that added suspense. He asked if they regretted anything between them. Sandra slowly nodded. She said she regretted letting time pass without telling him how much she valued him. She said life moved too fast, and she thought there would always be another day. Keanu looked at her with a calm, steady expression and said something that surprised everyone. He said he once tried to tell her something important, but he never found the right moment. Sandra's eyes widened. She turned toward him completely, her heart pounding. She whispered, asking what he wanted to say. Keanu smiled gently but did not answer yet. Instead, he said he did not want to say it in front of cameras. The host sensed their privacy and offered to pause the interview. But before he could stop the recording, something unexpected happened. Keanu leaned closer and spoke in a quiet, soft voice that only Sandra and the microphone near them could catch. He told her there was a moment years ago when he almost asked her a question he never asked anyone else. He said he kept it inside because he respected her space and her life path. He said he did not want to complicate things when she was already carrying so much. Sandra felt her heart stop for a second. She whispered, asking what the question was. Keanu looked at her with deep sincerity and said he would tell her only if she truly wanted to hear it now. The room felt as if it had stopped breathing. Sandra's eyes glistened as she nodded slowly. But before he could speak, the studio lights flickered. A sudden soft alarm rang from the control room. The producer rushed forward and signaled that something technical was happening. The moment was interrupted. Keanu looked at Sandra with an apologetic smile. She gave a small, breathless laugh, halfway between relief and disappointment. The host stood and said they needed a short break. Sandra and Keanu remained seated, staring at each other with the unspoken moment hanging between them like a fragile thread. Sandra whispered that maybe she was not ready. Keanu shook his head softly and told her something that made her heart warm. He said she did not need to be ready. He said some truths wait patiently. The break lasted only a few minutes, but for Sandra it felt much longer. She stepped away from the stage and walked toward a quiet corner of the studio. Her thoughts were racing, and every emotion inside her felt louder than before. She touched her chest lightly as if trying to calm her heartbeat. She could still hear Keanu's voice in her mind, soft and steady, telling her that some truths wait patiently. She did not know if that made her feel safe or scared. She looked around the room and saw people moving, fixing lights, checking equipment, but their faces felt far away. What stayed close was the moment she almost heard something Keanu kept inside for years. She wondered why he never said it back then. She wondered why he came now. She wondered what had changed. When she turned to look for him, she saw Keanu speaking quietly with one of the crew members. He looked calm as always, but there was something different in his eyes tonight. Something gentle but serious. Something that made her stomach twist in a way she did not expect. She watched him from a distance until he noticed her, and the moment their eyes met, her breath caught again. He started walking toward her with those same quiet steps of his, steady and soft. She waited, unsure of what to say. When he reached her, he stopped just close enough for her to feel his presence, but not close enough to overwhelm her. He always respected her space. That was something she never forgot. He asked softly if she was all right. She nodded, though it was not fully true. She said the sudden break startled her, and her thoughts were still heavy. Keanu gave a small, understanding smile. He told her it was normal to feel shaken when old feelings return without warning. Those words made her look at him with surprise. He said them with so much calm honesty that she felt her guard lowering again. She whispered, asking what he meant by old feelings. Keanu looked at her for a long second, long enough for her heart to tighten. Then he said that memories carry feelings inside them, even when we pretend they do not. He said he saw something in her eyes when his name came up. Sandra looked away quickly, her cheeks warming. She said she did not plan to talk about any of this today. Keanu nodded slowly and told her he understood. He said life rarely gives warnings before opening old doors. She took a deep breath and asked him the question that had been haunting her since he arrived. She asked why he came without telling her. Keanu looked thoughtful for a moment. Then he said he did not want to give her time to overthink. He said if he called first, she might have said she was not ready. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped because she knew he was right. The silence between them grew heavier, but it was not uncomfortable. It was full of meaning, full of questions waiting quietly in the air. Finally, Keanu shifted slightly and said there was something he wanted to clear before they went back on stage. Sandra felt her heart jump. She waited, but he stayed quiet for a moment, searching for the right words. He told her he never forgot that night on set. He said he remembered how tired she looked and how hard she tried to hide it. He said he sat with her because he could not leave her alone with that weight. Sandra felt her chest tighten again. She asked why that moment mattered so much to him. Keanu took a slow breath and said something she never expected. He said that night changed something in him too. He said it made him see her differently, not as a co-star, not as a public figure, but as a human being who carried so much strength and so much silent pain. Those words hit her with unexpected force. She swallowed carefully and whispered, asking why he never said any of this before. Keanu looked down for a moment, then back at her with honesty in his eyes. He said he kept quiet because he did not want to complicate her life. He said he did not know if she felt anything similar, and he respected her personal world too much to risk walking into it uninvited. Sandra felt her throat tighten. She asked if he thought about speaking to her later in life. Keanu nodded. He said yes. He said many times, but he always felt it might not be the right moment. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and sadness. She whispered that she wished he had. He gave a soft smile and said he wished the same, but life moved faster than both of them. Before she could answer, the host called them back to the stage. The crew signaled that the cameras were ready again. Sandra felt her heart drop a little. She was not ready to face the world with all these new emotions swirling inside her. But Keanu gently placed a hand near her arm without touching her. The gesture alone steadied her more than words could. They returned to their seats, but the atmosphere had changed. The viewers watching at home could feel something new, something deeper. The host looked at them with curiosity and warmth. He could sense the emotional shift as soon as they sat down. He asked them if they were all right. Sandra nodded with a small, controlled smile. Keanu nodded too, but kept his eyes on Sandra as if making sure she felt safe. The host then asked if they wanted to continue speaking about the past or move to a lighter topic. Sandra hesitated. Keanu glanced at her, silently letting her choose. She took a slow breath and said she wanted to continue. She said some things stay heavy until they are spoken. The host nodded with respect. He then asked Keanu if he would share what he tried to tell her before the break. The viewers leaned in. Sandra tensed slightly, not knowing if she was ready for the answer. Keanu looked at her gently. He did not rush. He did not push the moment. He simply asked her one question that surprised the entire studio. He asked her if she remembered the evening on the rooftop during one of their film nights when the city lights were soft and the wind was cold. Sandra's breath caught. She remembered that night clearly. She remembered the quiet. She remembered the comfort. She remembered the look in his eyes. But she did not know yet why he brought it up. Keanu leaned forward slightly and spoke in a quiet voice, full of honesty and something older than memory itself. He said that was the night he almost asked her something he had never asked anyone in his life. Sandra's heart stopped for a moment. The studio fell silent. The host waited without speaking. Sandra whispered the only words she could find. She asked him what he wanted to ask. Keanu opened his mouth to answer. Then the lights flickered again. The studio door opened fast, and someone unexpected walked in. The studio door opened so suddenly that everyone turned at the same time. Even the host stopped mid-breath. Sandra felt her heart jump, and Keanu straightened slightly as he looked toward the entrance. A woman from the production team walked in quickly and whispered something to the host. Her face looked tense, as if she carried news she did not want to interrupt with but had no choice. The host nodded carefully and thanked her in a quiet voice. When the woman stepped away, he looked at Keanu and Sandra with a serious expression. He said they needed to pause again because someone outside insisted on seeing them. Sandra's brows tightened. She whispered, asking who it could be. Keanu remained calm, his eyes fixed on the host. The host said a man had arrived claiming he worked with both of them many years ago. He said the man did not want to disturb the show, but had something important he wanted to deliver. The crew asked him to wait outside, but he refused to leave. He said he had held onto something for a long time, and tonight was the right night to return it. Sandra exchanged a confused look with Keanu. She could feel the tension climb again. She whispered, asking if he knew who it might be. Keanu shook his head slowly, though something in his eyes hinted that he was trying to remember. The host finally asked if they were willing to meet him for a moment. Sandra hesitated. She was already overwhelmed with emotions she did not expect to face today. But Keanu gave a gentle nod toward her, silently letting her decide. She took a slow breath and said yes. The cameras were paused again, and the studio dimmed slightly as they waited. Sandra and Keanu stayed seated, but their hearts felt heavy with questions. Soon the door opened again and an older man stepped inside. He walked slowly, holding a small envelope in his hand. His hair was gray, his face carried lines of age, and his eyes were soft but alert. Sandra stared at him with confusion. Keanu looked at him longer, studying his face carefully. Then the man smiled in a gentle, tired way. He said he used to work as a lighting assistant during the film where Sandra and Keanu first spent long hours together. The moment he said that, the memory clicked in Sandra's mind. She remembered him faintly, always working quietly behind the equipment. Keanu nodded slowly, recognizing him too. The man approached them and held out the envelope. He said he had something that belonged to them from many years ago, something he found one evening when everyone had left the set. He said he kept it because he believed one day the two of them would need it more than he did. Sandra took the envelope with careful hands. It felt old, the paper slightly worn. She opened it slowly, and inside she found a small folded note. Her heart tightened when she saw the handwriting. She recognized it instantly. It was hers. She unfolded it with trembling fingers and read the words she wrote long ago but never gave to anyone. It was a short message she wrote during that difficult time in her life. A message she wrote the night Keanu sat beside her on set. She had forgotten all about it. She remembered writing it, but she never had the courage to give it to him. The note said she was grateful for his presence. It said she felt stronger because he sat beside her. It said she felt safe because of him. It said she wished she could say more but did not know how. It ended with words she never expected to read again. She wrote that she hoped one day she would have the courage to tell him what her heart was too scared to admit at that time. Sandra's eyes filled with emotion. She held the paper close to her chest and closed her eyes for a brief moment. Keanu leaned slightly closer, trying to read her reaction. She handed him the note, and he read it carefully. His expression softened with every line. He looked at her with deep emotion when he reached the end. The man who delivered the envelope cleared his throat softly. He said he found the note near a chair on that same night. He guessed it was meant for Keanu, but never made it to him. He said he kept it safe because he felt it carried something important. He said he always hoped he would have a chance to return it. Today, he said, felt like the right day. Sandra thanked him in a quiet, sincere voice. Keanu thanked him too with a gentle nod. The man smiled once more and left the room quietly. As soon as the door closed, silence filled the studio again. Sandra felt exposed in a way she had not felt in years. Her old emotions were no longer hidden. Keanu knew the truth now. He held the note carefully as if it were fragile. He looked at her with warmth and something deeper. He whispered, asking why she never gave it to him. Her voice shook slightly when she answered. She said she was scared. She said she did not want to burden him. She said she thought he had enough to carry. She said she believed he would forget that moment anyway. Keanu shook his head softly. He said he never forgot. He said that night stayed in his heart because he saw someone he cared about struggling quietly. He said the note would have meant the world to him back then. She looked down, her eyes glistening. She whispered that she wished she had known. Keanu gently placed the note on the table between them. He leaned slightly closer, his voice steady and soft. He told her there were things he wished he had said too, things he held inside for too long, things he wanted to share but never found the courage to speak. Sandra looked up, her heart pounding. She whispered, asking if the question he almost asked on the rooftop had something to do with those feelings. Keanu nodded. She held her breath. The host, sensing the moment had returned, restarted the cameras slowly. The lights brightened again. The atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation. Keanu looked at Sandra, his eyes filled with honesty that made her chest tighten. He said the question he almost asked her that night was the same question he came here to ask today. Sandra froze. Her fingers trembled. The host leaned forward. The viewers watching would soon be on the edge of their seats. Sandra whispered the only words her heart could form. She asked him what the question was. Keanu opened his mouth to answer. But before he could speak, the studio phone rang loudly. And someone yelled from the hallway that there was breaking news connected to Keanu. The sudden shout from the hallway made everyone turn. The sound hit the room like a sharp wave, and the host quickly raised his hand, signaling the crew to pause the cameras. Sandra felt her stomach twist. Keanu turned his head calmly, but there was a new seriousness in his eyes. The hallway grew louder as footsteps rushed toward the studio entrance. A young assistant entered, breathing fast. She looked at Keanu with worry and then glanced at the host. She apologized for interrupting, but she said something urgent had come in. She said the news was spreading fast and she needed to inform Keanu immediately. The room grew still, and even Sandra moved closer with concern. The assistant handed a tablet to Keanu. He looked at it quietly, his face calm but slightly tense. Sandra watched him closely, searching for any sign of fear or confusion. She whispered, asking if everything was all right. Keanu did not answer right away. He kept reading, and his eyes grew softer, not scared, but deeply moved. The host finally asked him what happened. Keanu took a slow breath and said the news was not dangerous but emotional. He explained that someone from his past had spoken publicly about him, someone he once helped quietly, someone he never expected to hear from again. The assistant said the interview was going viral at that very moment. Sandra watched his face carefully. She whispered, asking who it was. Keanu lowered the tablet slightly and said it was a woman he had helped many years ago. She had kept her story private until today. And now she was telling the world how Keanu's kindness had changed her life. She revealed that he helped her during a very dark time and never asked for anything in return. His name was now trending everywhere, and the world was praising him for something he never intended to reveal. Sandra felt an emotional ache in her chest. She knew how humble he was. She knew he hated attention that came from acts of kindness. She gently asked him if he was all right. Keanu nodded, but with a thoughtful expression. He said he never expected the moment he almost shared with Sandra here tonight would collide with something from his past at the same time. The host decided to turn on the cameras again because this moment was too real and too meaningful to ignore. He looked gently toward Keanu and asked if he wanted to continue the story or take a break. Keanu shook his head softly and said he wanted to continue, but he was also trying to understand why everything was happening on the same night. The host leaned forward and asked him a question that made Sandra swallow lightly. He asked if this old story of kindness connected to the question he wanted to ask Sandra. Keanu gave a small, quiet smile, the kind that carried years of hidden emotions. He said it did connect in a way. He said the past and present often meet when we least expect. Sandra turned toward him completely now. Her eyes were soft and full of unspoken thoughts. She whispered, asking if the story from his past reminded him of something he wanted to tell her today. Keanu nodded slowly. He said the story reminded him that unspoken words and unfinished moments stay inside us longer than we think. They stay inside until something pushes them to the surface. He said hearing that woman speak about him tonight reminded him of the quiet truth he carried for years about Sandra. Sandra felt her breath catch again. She whispered his name, her voice gentle, urging him to continue. Keanu turned toward her with calm seriousness. He said the rooftop night he mentioned earlier was the first time he almost asked her if she ever felt something deeper between them. Not romantic pressure, not expectation, something quiet, something real, something built from understanding and respect, something that lived between their silences. Sandra froze, her heart squeezed tightly in her chest. She remembered that night clearly. The cold air, the soft city lights, the quiet feeling she could not explain. She remembered wanting to say something but not having the courage. The host stayed completely silent. The crew stayed frozen. The cameras captured every breath. Keanu continued slowly. He said he never asked because she looked tired that night. He said he respected her too much to add weight to a heavy moment. He said he decided she needed comfort, not confusion. He said his question could wait. Sandra looked at him with widened eyes, her voice almost a whisper. She asked what exactly he wanted to ask. Keanu smiled softly at her, but it was not a playful smile. It was sincere, deep, and full of memory. He said he wanted to ask if she ever felt safe with him the way he felt safe with her. He said he wanted to ask if she ever wondered why their quiet moments felt different from their public ones. He said he wanted to know if she ever thought about them the same way he did. Sandra felt something warm break inside her. She blinked slowly, her eyes shining. She whispered that she did feel it. She whispered that she hid it. She whispered that she thought she was imagining it all those years. She whispered that she did not want to complicate things either. Keanu's eyes softened more. He said he always thought he was the only one holding those thoughts. Sandra shook her head with a trembling smile. She said he was not alone. She said she carried those feelings quietly for a long time. The host finally spoke, his voice soft with respect. He said this was the first time he had ever seen two people open old memories so honestly in front of the world. He asked them what they wanted to do with these truths now. Keanu turned to Sandra again. His voice was steady but gentle. He said he came today because he did not want to wait anymore. He said the world could change overnight. He said time moved too fast. He said he was tired of wondering. Sandra leaned forward slightly, her fingers gripping her seat. She whispered, asking what he wanted now. Keanu looked into her eyes with quiet courage. He said he wanted to know if she was ready now to hear the question he kept inside for years. The room tightened with silence. The world watching held its breath. Sandra felt every heartbeat in her chest. She whispered yes. She said she was ready. Keanu took a breath. Then the lights flickered again, and someone from outside shouted that there was another update. This time the news was not about Keanu. It was about Sandra. The shout from the hallway made Sandra tense instantly. The studio door opened again and another assistant rushed inside. Her face looked pale, almost worried, and she held a phone in her hand tightly. The host stood up, confused, and asked what happened. The assistant took a slow breath and said the news was spreading everywhere. It involved Sandra, something emotional, something unexpected. Keanu turned toward Sandra with concern. She looked back at him with unsettled eyes. She whispered, asking what the update was. The assistant came closer and handed the phone to the host. He looked at the screen and his eyebrows lifted in surprise. Then he turned the screen toward Sandra. It was a video. A fan from many years ago was speaking. A woman who once met Sandra quietly at a charity event. She said Sandra helped her at a time when she felt invisible. She said Sandra sat beside her and listened to her story with real care. She said Sandra encouraged her to keep going when she felt lost. And she said that moment changed her life. She had stayed silent for many years but decided today was the right day to tell the world. The video was emotional. The woman cried softly as she explained how Sandra's kindness gave her strength to rebuild her life, how a few gentle words gave her hope when she had none, and how she still carried that night in her heart as the turning point she never forgot. Sandra covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filled with emotion. She did not expect this. She had forgotten that night because she never saw it as a big gesture, but for the woman in the video, it had been everything. Keanu watched her with warmth in his eyes. He turned slightly and whispered very quietly that this was who she truly was, someone whose kindness touched people more than she ever realized. The assistant explained that the video was spreading fast. People were talking about Sandra's quiet compassion just as they were talking about Keanu's old story. The world was seeing both of them in a new light on the same night. Two people known for honesty, humility, and kindness, both being appreciated in a way neither of them expected. The host finally spoke again and said something that softened the whole room. He said it was no surprise that the world was celebrating them both. He said they had always shared a rare kind of goodness, even if they never spoke about it. Sandra looked at Keanu again, her heart full. She whispered that she did not expect any of this tonight. Keanu nodded softly. He said he did not expect it either, but he said maybe everything was happening for a reason. They sat down again, but the atmosphere felt different, calmer, deeper, realer. The world outside was talking about them both, their quiet kindness, their stories, their moments, and now those unspoken memories between them stood with new meaning. The host leaned forward and said gently that they could stop the interview if they wanted. He said they could take time to breathe, but Keanu shook his head and Sandra did the same. They both felt something important was still unfinished. The host nodded with respect and asked Keanu if he wanted to continue the moment from before the interruptions. Sandra turned slowly toward Keanu. Her heart beat louder. She whispered that she was ready. She whispered that she wanted to hear the question he carried for years. Keanu took a long, gentle breath. He looked at her with a softness that held years of memory, admiration, and a quiet courage he finally allowed himself to feel. The room grew silent again. Even the crew stood still, afraid to break the moment. Keanu spoke quietly, but his voice was steady. He said the question he almost asked her on that rooftop was simple but heavy. He said he kept it inside because he respected her too much to risk burdening her. He said he waited for a moment when they were both calm and open. He said he felt that moment finally arrived tonight. Sandra's fingers trembled slightly on her lap. She waited, holding her breath. Keanu looked into her eyes and asked the question he kept inside for years. He asked if she ever wanted a moment where it was just them, not as co-stars, not as public figures, not as people hiding behind work and busy schedules, just them. Sitting together, talking openly, sharing something real, something they never gave themselves the chance to explore. He asked if she ever wished for that, even once. Sandra's eyes filled instantly. Her voice broke softly when she whispered her answer. She said yes. She said she wished for it many times. She said she felt it in the quiet moments where they shared silence without needing words. She said she carried it for years but never spoke because she thought he saw her only as a friend. Keanu shook his head gently. He said he always saw more truth in her than she ever believed. He said he admired her strength and her heart more than he could express. He said he wished he had found the courage long ago. Sandra smiled through her tears. She whispered that maybe the timing was not wrong after all. Maybe they were meant to speak about it now, after life had shaped them into who they were today. Keanu nodded softly. The host stayed silent, giving them space. The cameras captured a moment that felt too genuine to script. Keanu reached out slowly, not touching her, but offering his hand near hers. Sandra looked at it with a shaky smile. She placed her hand gently near his, the same way he did years ago on set, not touching, but close enough to feel honesty and trust. Keanu whispered that he did not want answers tonight. He did not want decisions. He only wanted clarity. He said he wanted to know they both carried the same truth, even if they handled it differently. Sandra nodded again, her voice soft. She said she carried it. She said she never forgot. She said she wished she had found the courage sooner. Keanu smiled with warmth that lit the entire studio. He whispered that everything was all right. He said the past was not a mistake. It was simply waiting for today. The host finally ended the interview gently, saying the world had witnessed something rare. Honesty, respect, connection. Two people who always walked with kindness and humility finally opening the door they kept closed for years. When the cameras turned off, Sandra leaned closer to Keanu and whispered that she was thankful he came tonight. He whispered back that he was thankful she let him in. As they walked out of the studio together, the world outside continued talking about their kindness. But inside, something new and quiet began between them, something peaceful, something honest, something built from years of unspoken truth. Something that finally found its moment.